Welcome back to Good Morning Oakcrest. I'm Tamika Harris, and we have with us today Nancy Barzak, Director of Resident Life, as well as Scott Spangler, who joins us to talk about, is this a scam? Now, I'm sure many of you have wondered one day or another if that mailing that you've gotten in the mail is a scam or if that phone call has been a scam. Well, today we get to give you some great information where you can discern whether you have a scam or not. So, Scott, Nancy, good morning.
Good morning.
This is a topic that we cannot talk enough about. It's always great to educate ourselves about what's going on and what we receive. And so today is the platform where we talk about that. Is this a real scam?
Well, I think I am just thrilled that Scott is here. Scott has a lot of expertise in helping our residents when they have received these unusual phone calls, unusual things in the mail. And in resident life, we're very concerned about our residents some who have been alert and have said, this is not making sense, and then called security to say, I got this phone call, I got this mailing, and others who unfortunately didn't recognize that somebody was trying to take advantage of them. So we wanted to take today to educate our residents so that they know how to recognize a scam when it happens. So Scott, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I guess my question is, folks are getting calls and things sent to them in the mail, right, Scott?
Yeah, fraud can come in a lot of different flavors and varieties.
Okay, so how do we discern or discover if something is truly from the bank or the mall or wherever we normally go? How can we decide where it's coming from?
Well, the biggest thing I like to tell people is if it's a legitimate organization or if it's from a legitimate company, they're going to take the burden of proof and they're going to try to prove to you that they're legitimate. Example, if you get a phone call from somebody claiming to be Social Security and they need to verify information, which, by the way, most companies won't do anymore. They won't call you and ask for information.
Oh, okay.
But the burden of proof is on them. So if I say to this person, you know what, I don't believe you are who you say you are, then they're going to give you additional resources. They're going to say, okay, well, look, here's our switchboard number. You can call this and ask for me. This is my extension. They're going to take the steps necessary to prove they are who they say they are.
Oh, okay. What are some things that have been happening on the campus as far as you know?
Well, we've had a lot of different problems. We've had a lot of mail fraud, which are typically sweepstakes, or a lot of times it's inheritance scams, things like that, to say that you've won XYZ amount of money from a relative you didn't know you had. We also have a lot of phone scams. Somebody will call up and say, hey, I'm from Bank of America and I need your Social Security number because our records are out of date. We also had a very, very small number of people that would come to the door, which we're pretty good about catching those. But there have been a small number of people that would come to the door and say, I'm here with whatever company and I need to verify this or that.
So people who've actually been on campus knocking at
Yeah, it has
residents'
happened.
doors.
Very small number,
Wow.
but it has happened.
Wow. Very desperate people out there, right, Nancy?
They are, and they are, how can I say this? They're preying on seniors.
Right.
And I think our seniors know that there are a lot of seniors out there. We tend to be very trusting people. We have a lot of friends and family we can trust. And when these criminals pose as people that we should trust, and then we give them information, it puts our financial security at risk. And so I've learned so much from Scott, and the key thing is don't share your personal information with anyone until you have validated that they are who they say they are. And that's really critically important. And how can a person go about that? You began to describe how can a person, one of our residents who maybe gets a phone call and this person is saying, I want to validate that your records are up to date, but to do that I need your Social Security number. What should that resident do?
Well, one of the first things I'll tell the residents is, let's say it's Capital One or Bank of America. If you look up their number in the phone book and call them, you'll be able to ask for that person. You'll be able to, let's say it was Joe. Well, you'll be able to call Capital One and say, hey, I got a phone call from a guy who claimed his name was Joe and that he needed my Social Security number. Well, the switchboard operators will be able to say, oh, okay, well, I know Joe. Let me transfer you to him. And then that way you kind of know that that's the company you're dealing with. Whereas when the person calls you, you're not sure who you're dealing with.
Right. So if they got a call to their apartment, one of the things they can do to validate that they are who they say they are is say, oh, thank you so much for calling. If you're from this bank or this credit card company or this investment firm, I have that number. I'm going to hang up with you now, and I'm going to call that number directly. Thank you for alerting me that you need additional information.
Oh, okay.
And so in that way, the resident can be sure when they initiate the phone call that it's based on a number of literature that they have gotten from their bank or their credit card company or their investment people, and they know that they're talking to who they're talking to.
Yeah, I must say that there was an incident in my family where my husband's grandmother got that phone call, ma'am, we need your social security number. And most times that could be the red flag that you look for. Social security number, you know not to give that out over the phone especially. Would you be so far as to say that that extends with family members too, people who call you and say, I'm your daughter, or it could even be a family member, but would you suggest that you give that number out over the phone?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. One of the most, I guess you could say, most popular scams, and unfortunately one of the most damaging, is we've had an individual and individuals in the past have called our residents and said, you know, hey, it's your grandson. And unfortunately, a lot of our residents will immediately say, oh, is this Tyler? Oh, yeah, it's Tyler, your grandson. And then they'll proceed with different scams. Sometimes it's, you know, I'm a police officer and I have your son in custody and he needs, you know, $2,500 in bail or what have you.
Wow.
Unfortunately, people use whatever means possible, and they really prey on the fact that the residents here and senior citizens in general are a caring population, and they want to help their families. And so they'll do whatever it takes to, I guess, pull that string.
Okay.
So, you know, if you get a call from somebody purporting to be a family member, and typically these people will disguise their voices. They'll use tears, or they'll be upset, and they'll do different measures to kind of, so you're not really sure who it is. I would definitely recommend, again, if it's a legitimate person, if it is your grandson, they're going to provide you that opportunity to prove that. So, you know, you'll say, okay, well, I'll tell you what, let me go check something. I'll call you back on your cell phone, or I'll call you back at your house. I mean, the other thing is verify it with personal information only they'd know. Be like, oh, well, Tyler, do you remember this trip? Where did we go 10 years ago? You know, and only the real person would know that kind of information.
Yeah. If you're just joining me, I'm speaking with Nancy Barzak, Director of Resident Life, as well as Scott Spangler, who joins us from security. We're talking about scams, wondering what we get and when we get phone calls. Is it a real scam? And most times it could be.
It could be. Another thing, when Scott and I, or Scott, I should say, was teaching me more about scams, when someone calls and says, you know, through tears and, you know, a shaky voice and all upset, this is your grandson and I'm in trouble, Grandma, I need your help. Think about it. Would your grandson call you, or would they call their parents if they were in trouble?
Good point.
The reality is that grandchildren typically don't call their grandparents when they're in trouble and need bail money or whatever.
Exactly.
They call their parents, and their parents are the ones that would respond. So think through the logic of the scam story. Another thing is to recognize what many of us don't know much about, and that's the criminal justice system. If someone's in trouble with the law, Scott has taught me, and I'll let him speak to this, an officer's not going to say, I need you to bring $1,000 or $2,500 to a location for bail money. That's not the way it works. And so there's no need, there's no rush, there's no cash involved. And so that's just a phony scam.
Well, you bring up a good point, though, Nancy. How do we work through that point of urgency? What is a good technique that we can use to calm our emotions down and pull our emotions out of it and really assess what's going on?
Well, I think it's important to realize that, especially with cases, you know, criminal justice is one, or sometimes they'll use, you know, your grandson has a broken down car, different measures. There's never going to be the need for you to drop off money or to give money away at 1 in the morning. You know, these people are going to give you the opportunity to say, okay, well, look, I'll call you tomorrow. What's a good contact number? And that gives you time to kind of pump the brakes a little bit and look into it and say, okay, well, how can I verify that this person is who they say they are? I mean, generally speaking, a point I want to drive home is that if it smells funny or if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't.
Yeah.
I mean, overall, these things, legitimate companies, everything will add up. Whereas if the person's not legitimate or the company's not legitimate, it won't add up. Something will just feel wrong overall.
Well, we talked about the criminal aspect of it, someone calling or doing something like that. But what about the sweepstakes? You've won something. Let's talk about that. I know, like Nancy always says, is if it's too good to be true, it usually is. So how do we avoid falling for the inheritance scam or the you won something scam?
Well, the first point, if you didn't sign up for a sweepstakes, let's say it's a Publishers Clearinghouse or what have you. If you didn't sign up to win, you can't win. I've never been called up and say, hey, I got some free money waiting for you. You have to sign up to win first off. And the same thing with inheritance fraud. If you don't remember Uncle Joe, you don't have an Uncle Joe. So it's, you're going to know who your family members are. And so you should be able to determine that way. The second thing is, the keystone to these frauds is they'll say, you've won $2 million or whatever, what number. We have to pay taxes and shipping and delivery fees. And, the first thing I always think is, well, if I've won $2 million, take my shipping and taxes out of my $2 million and you can send me the remainder. So that's a big thing. And unfortunately, a lot of the scammers have caught on to that, and now they'll send you a check and they'll say, oh, well, this check will defray the costs. So what will happen is you'll take that check to the bank and deposit it and then send them the money. Well, 7 days later or whatever, you'll get notice that the check bounced.
Wow.
So I would say that if you get one in the mail that has a check attached, or if it says use this to defray the costs, to either try to cash that immediately, pay it out to cash, or also to wait until it clears to mail it in. And there's no concern to that. If you cash a fraudulent check or if you deposit a fraudulent check, they can't get any information from you that way. No information is shared.
I've always been suspicious of awards that you have to pay for, or if it's mine, it's mine.
Right.
I don't want to pay for anything.
If you really won something or an inheritance is really coming to you, you don't owe any money.
Exactly.
There is no need to pay for something you've
an award,
won.
right?
It just doesn't make sense.
What about, and I know we're moving into the technical, or we are in that whole tech era, and some residents are online. Speak to scams that can be found online or could be emailed.
Well, there's so many. The best thing to do with computing, first off, is to find a source, to find somebody that's good with computers, maybe it's a grandchild or a child, and say, what can I do to protect myself? I know we have a computer club here, they're a great resource. And just to find somebody that can explain to you the basics. But again, computing can be similar to mail fraud or phone fraud. If it feels too good to be true, it probably is. If you're browsing the internet and you get a pop-up that says, free money, well, you probably, there's no such thing as free. There's always a string attached somewhere. So you got to ask yourself, would I really be able to sign up and get $3 million for filling a form out? No, probably not. So, you really have to use just common sense. And I also always recommend people, if possible, check your statements online, because then you're having regular access. If you get a paper statement in the mail, then you're only getting those every 30 days. If you check it online, you're getting daily updates. And then that way, if an account activity changes, you catch it right at the source.
There was a particular online scam where, we do exchanges with different folks, different vendors, and it came into, I think, our inbox here in the studio that a person that we well knew was out in some type of country and they had got robbed and needed some money, and we knew this person very well, and we were just like, this couldn't be. And so it just kind of piqued our flags a little bit, like, whoa, what, and of course we knew it was a scam, but someone who's not familiar with that could say, oh, someone that I know is really in trouble and they could need some help. Right. So have you seen that kind of scam where they say someone
Is
such and such.
traveling
And what
internationally.
happened is that someone, a criminal, hacked into their email account and sent this fraudulent email out to everyone that they knew.
On their contact list.
Right.
Well, it's interesting. There's actually free software, and I've done this before, where you don't even really have to hack into somebody's account. You can make it appear from another email. They call it ghost mailing. So unfortunately, a lot of people will, they'll call up this person and they'll say, hey, did somebody hack your email, or have you lost access? And they'll say, no, I haven't lost access. Then later they get a fraudulent email. And they think, oh, it must be real. I just talked to him. He hasn't lost access.
Yeah.
So you can actually mimic another email account. So unfortunately, most of the time you can trust an email, but if they're asking for things, I would always raise a red flag.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess the purpose of today's show is not to scare anyone, but to just let you
Make
know, to
people
double
aware.
check. Yeah, and to keep you aware of what's going on. Because in that instance, we happened to call the person that, they said, the fraudulent person said that was the person, not to confuse you. And she said, yeah, my email account had gotten hacked into, so, I'm
Exactly.
making the appropriate
You
steps.
checked it out with
exactly.
the source person.
Yeah.
And that kind of gets back to what Scott and I were talking about before. If you got a phone call, you would say, thank you for that information, hang up, and then call the source number you have from your bank account, your credit card, or your financial investment accounts, and make sure you're talking to who you want to be talking to. If anybody's asking for personal information, red flags need to go off. You've got to validate who they are. And Scott put together a real nice list of some tips and tricks, if you will, of things to help you avoid scams. And we can kind of go to that slide, if we will, and you can see some important things there. Checking your annual credit report is something that you can do online, and many residents might not have computer access, but we can provide more information through the security office with Scott on how to do that. And there's also 1-800 numbers to call, and these are credible organizations to make sure your credit is not being impacted, that your financial information is protected. And then, as Scott mentioned, monitor your bank accounts. Every 30 days you get a statement. Make sure it's exactly the way it's supposed to be based on your expenditures and your bank deposits. And if you are computer savvy, you can go online and get that information immediately and follow it more closely than every 30 days. Paper shredders shred things that have your personal information, your social security numbers, your birth dates, and other information like that. And we have the shred it boxes in each of the community buildings if you don't have your own paper shredder. And this is a good one. Use thick envelopes when sending checks. If you're sending a check to, well, you guys don't write checks to BG&E like we do, but
to anyone.
To anyone.
Yeah, if your birthday money.
Birthday money to the kids, make sure the check is in an envelope that you can't hold up to the light and see numbers through. And it sounds silly, but nonetheless, it's important. That way you protect your account number that way. You want to hit some of the others there?
Well, lockbox your personal information. It's always good to have a safe. A lot of people are in and out of our houses, and it's always good to have personal info locked up. Not that you can't trust the people that are in your apartment, but it's nice to have it locked up so that you can kind of keep it limited to who goes in there. Lower your credit limit to personal use. This is good for if somebody, for example, let's say somebody gets your credit card number, they're making fraudulent charges. If your credit limit is as low as you need it to be, they can only go so far. So I know some people carry a credit limit, $30,000, $40,000. If you don't need it, then don't keep it that high. Then it kind of limits your damage if they should get your information. And of course, always protect your social security number and other personal information. Not many people use social security numbers anymore. It's really changed who is going to use a social security number. So generally speaking, very few agencies will require that, very few people will. So limit that. And if most forms nowadays, job applications, it's optional. So verify with the person, do you really need to use my social? And most of the time the answer is no.
So what is our take-home message today?
I think our take-home message is be savvy, be smart, and in the midst of when somebody says, I need money, they're calling on the phone and they're impersonating a grandchild or someone that you might know, take a deep breath and think, has anyone ever called me for money like this before? Should this
Yeah.
grandchild be calling their parents for help? If their car broke down and they desperately need help, why can't they just get in a cab and figure out what to do tomorrow morning when there's light of day instead of 2 a.m. in the morning? Using logical thinking,
Yeah.
taking a deep breath and saying, this isn't right.
Yeah.
This just isn't right. And hang up and call your grandson, call your son, you know, whoever that you have a phone number for, and say, I just got a weird phone call and I want to make sure everybody's all right.
There you go.
And validate it with the source person. And the same thing if it's a bank or a person saying they're the bank, or a credit card company or an investment company that you might have investments with. Say, thank you for the information, hang up, and then go to your files, go to your phone numbers that you have for those different agencies and call them directly so you know you're talking to who you're talking to.
That makes sense. And you know, I know there's someone probably watching us saying, oh, that's wonderful, but it would never happen to me.
It happens.
And I just want you, Nancy, of course, and Scott, if you want to chime in, that this kind of thing happens on campus, believe it or not.
It happens everywhere. And in Scott and my conversation, I shared with him, and I don't mind sharing with our viewers, in the course of time, I would say in the last 10 years, I've had 2 credit cards that the credit card company said, Nancy doesn't normally make purchases here and here. And they've called me and said, are you making charges in Pennsylvania? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? And I could say, no, I'm not. Well, they said, somebody's got your number. We're canceling your account, and so on and so forth. And even then, I was suspicious. So I said, thank you for the information. I hung up, and I got that credit card out. It has a 1-800 number on the back of it, and I called that number and then knew that I was talking to that credit card company to make sure indeed, you know, here the company's trying to tell me and protect me, but no, Nancy's suspicious. And Nancy calls the number she knows is associated with that credit card company and made sure that they were the right people to talk to before I gave them any information.
So what type of protection do residents have on campus against scams within our security department?
Well, I do want to drive home to the viewers today. It's a very safe campus. The problems come in the phone calls and the mail. Obviously, we don't monitor the mail, and we can't monitor your phone calls. So those are the big ones, absolutely the big ones. Now, as far as visitors coming onto property and things of that nature, I mean, we're much more in control of that. And of course, if anybody comes to your door, you pull your pull cord, and we'll be up there. And we're very good about monitoring that access.
Or give them a good hi-ya or something like that.
I mean, and of course we're here for information. I have tons of information on frauds and thefts and scams, and I'm happy to provide it to anybody that wants it. I mean, the biggest way to prevent this is to just use some common sense and basic techniques. And again, to kind of remove your emotions and remove that sense of urgency and just take a step back and say, you know what, I'm gonna look into this a little bit, and if you need my help with that, absolutely call me. I'm happy to help. I have some of the officers help me with these kinds of things, and we look into things.
And residents have been bringing down certain mailings and things like that.
Yeah, I have a good catalog. Yeah.
Oh, great.
I have a big file folder of different things.
Great. So if someone receives something, they can come to the security department.
Yeah, they can bring it to me. I'd
Absolutely.
be happy to prove it.
Great.
And again, though, just to kind of with the mailings. If it feels too good to be true, it probably is. And if you didn't
Go with
sign
your
up for the
gut.
sweepstakes, right? A lot of people call me and they say, "Hey, I got this thing in the mail. It says I won $32 million." I said, "Well, did you sign up?" And they said, "No." I said, "Well, it's probably not true. You know, most of the time they don't pick a person and just say, 'Hey, we're going to give this person millions of dollars.'"
Yeah.
I mean,
Be nice, but yeah,
Right.
and you can
I
donate
wish.
that to Benevolent Care Fund.
Right.